referred to earlier for the development in the noughties. So in other words, the development is coming up around. I mean, there are a huge amount of schools. I lost count of the schools in there, you know. Columbanus and Meath, there's everything, St. Stephen's School. So now we have new sign house, 20A and 20, yeah. That's St. Martha's Bridge. So that, yeah, just go back a bit. That's the new bridge across the Boyne at Ravinda House. And immediately you go on to the next one, to Sion House in Johnstown even, is the Burke family home, formerly home to Pentonys and Casey's of nearby Casey's Cross. And the late Mrs. Kathleen Burke reached the ripe old age of 102. And obviously the air around there is very good. So, that's Mrs. Burke, yeah. What's next? Oh, that's, yeah, there's Sion Road. Again, it's nice to see the names being remembered. The County Council, we give them credit for that. So where are we? Yes, as we continue our journey down the hill to meet the Boyne River at Kilcarn Bridge, right, which has a fine span of 11 arches. That's when it was still just go back to the other one. When it was still motorised. It's now obviously pedestrianised. Jack Sarsfield's cottage was here, and Jack trained his dog to smoke a pipe. Well, at least to hold it in his mouth. I'm not sure what the dog died from, but anyway. The bridge is now closed to vehicular traffic. You can go on there, and has a fine span of 11 arches. And it provides a very pleasant walk across the Boyne. The bridge dates back to the 15th century and is first mentioned by the great wartime chieftain Hugh O'Neill, the Earl of Tyrone, in 1599, and is recorded in the Civil Survey of County Meath of 1654. So I think we're in the Boyne, yeah. The bridge underwent various changes over the centuries, attaining its full width in 1822. It has a number of niches on either side. There's no little things that you can go in, but you don't need them now, obviously, so you could avoid the traffic. And it's now referred to as the Old Bridge, and it was deemed inadequate for increasing road traffic on the N3 in the 70s, and in 1977 was replaced by a new bridge just immediately upstream. At one stage after its closure, a drastic proposal for the demolition of this architectural and historical gem was considered by the powers that be. Thankfully, this terrible intervention was avoided from the good work of the Safe Kilcarn Bridge Committee, in which our eminent ICA ladies were prominent, persuaded the then Minister for Local Government, James Tully, a proud Minority man, to ensure its repair and preservation for future generations, which we're very thankful for. And across from the river in the town of Ballarisk in Navan Parish, because it's in Navan Parish, we won't deal it on this talk, was the site of a toll gate where a hitching post could be seen for tying horses to. High above the bridge, next, we have a house which was called Kilcarn Lodge. As we venture south, and we're going to head up the Dublin Road. This is an absolutely gorgeous house and gardens, and I am grateful to all the owners of the houses for permission to use their. Most of them are away, and they were able to open the gate from 3,000 miles away from me. This house was formerly called Maryville, after Mary Murphy, who was the wife of the man who built it. We'll talk about him in a minute in Kilcarn Park. And he called Kilcarn Park Charlesville. So no egotism there, obviously. And but it came from Maryville then to Kilcarn Lodge. But in the meantime, the residence was once the property of a man called Chicken Hardtop, Hardtopp, a military man who was so fond of hunting that he rode to hounds on 6 days a week and kept a pack of hounds himself to hunt on Sundays. The house thus became known for a while as the Kennels. Apparently he was a thoroughly unpleasant individual, and the story goes that his headman would not tell him his religion. So one Saturday night he put aniseed on the headman's boots, and when the unfortunate man headed for his church, the hounds were released to follow and catch up with them at the door of the church, where they were called off just in time before he was attacked. While the story does not relate the denomination of his church, it does reflect the nasty behaviour of a soldier who was subsequently cashiered out of the Indian Army. Further on the left then, okay, yes, come to this absolutely gorgeous dwelling. This is Kilcarn Park. That's okay. We saw it in its glory. Yeah. Oh, there we are. Beautiful house. And there's a yard now. We're not doing justice with the photograph, but the house is kept in immaculate condition. And then there's quite a huge yard then, a closed yard beside it. Obviously this is a new bit on the left. So as I said, this was formerly called Charlesville, after its founder, Charles Murphy, one of a much respected Catholic family. The Murphy ladies taught catechism to the children of the locality. At one time, the family owned a distillery in Navan, located beside the railway bridge in Academy Street. It was reputedly from this distillery along the old Dublin Road through their estate that whisky was brought and was given to the Croppies on the eve of the Battle of Tara, an action which may well have had a significant effect on the nature of their fighting prowess on the day of the battle the following day. At the time of the Fenian Rising in 1867, a Major Murphy was a local magistrate, and when any one of his locals, or any of his own workmen indeed, were brought before him, probably for political or trivial offences, no one would know that he had already interviewed them privately and instructed them as to what to say when they faced him in court. One of the last members of this family was married to a direct descendant of Thomas Francis Marr, known as Marr of the Sword, the proud proposer of our national tricolour in 1848. All around the fields of the Murphy estate were very fine cherry trees, none of which were ever allowed to fall. If in danger, they were propped up, but I think they're gone now. This property is still graced with wonderful plantings of very well-tended trees and is kept magnificently by the Cultural family, who also have a poultry farm there. The Carolan family subsequently operated a successful horse breeding enterprise at Kilcarn Park, and producing many winners, including Batista at the Cheltenham Festival in 1982, where the jockey was done for the whip. But anyway, the horse won the race. The house and lands are now owned by the Cultural family, as I say, who maintain this significant house and beautifully wooded estate with great care. The famous or infamous, the next slide, Collier the robber plied his lucrative trade along this part of the old Dublin Road, adjoining the present Mill Lane, adjacent to the Boyne, at the end of which are the remains of an old flour mill, first recorded in 1702. And my memories of this is when the Bradleys had it as a water station, and it was a fascinating but very dangerous place for a child to be, but lucky enough I didn't drown. But it was fascinating, the wheels and the water and the weirs and everything like that. So it's still a filtration system for Navan, and I think the water comes down from the reservoir, as they say. So the mill, which for many years provided flour for the Dublin market, was leased on a 999-year lease by the famous McCann family of Drogheda in 1822, who worked the mill until 1898, when it was then sold to the Navan Town Commissioners for use as an intake and pumping station for the town water supply. Further on the Dublin Road, now on the right-hand side, and overlooking a lovely stretch of the Boyne, we go on, we come across Kilcarn House, which is Kilcarn Stud. And I had the great pleasure of meeting what we always refer to as Miss Pat. Miss Pat, yeah, who is alive and fairly well, and was watching racing from Yarmouth. So I think if you're watching for racing from Yarmouth, you're pretty interested, you know. So this place was the home of many, many winners, including an Irish Derby, an Irish Oaks, 1,000 guineas of French Oaks, English St. Leger, and many other Group 1 races. And it was started in the 1930s by Major Edward Ned O'Kelly, an army veterinary surgeon and a true gentleman, who on his return from military service in World War II continued to run this highly successful equine operation, which is now carried on by his daughter Patricia, and as I said, which has produced a line of classic and other big race winners. A feature of haymaking which I remember on this farm with the Delanys years ago was the custom of carefully making old-fashioned haycocks on top of wooden tripods. And this was to protect the drying hay from rain settling underneath. And it meant that the best possible forage for their valuable thoroughbred mares and foals would be kept throughout the winter. The last member of the Ford family to occupy this farm was a practicing solicitor. This was before Major Kelly, obviously. Matty Neal, an employee of the family who died in 1934 at the age of 90, recalled that he started work there as a page boy. One of his first tasks was to learn how to salute properly. Mrs. Ford would sit out on the lawn while he would march up and down, being taught how to salute. He progressed to coachman, and every year he would drive Mrs. Ford to visit the famous Father Charles of Mount Argus in Dublin, as a sort of a pilgrimage. Another task was to ride a donkey to Mount Anvil Convent in Dublin with provisions to the Misses Ford, who were at school there, and it appears that he always wore a top hat, and this sight was reputedly a source of great amusement to see a man in a top hat riding a donkey through Sackville Street. He later joined the Fenians, and he had to flee to the United States after the failed rising of 1867, where he worked on a dairy farm, took out American citizenship, and then returned home to spend 50 years working on the O'Brien family farm at Old Town. So, some life. Further up the Dublin Road, we go again. By the way, the view from, or the scene and the ambience of Kilcarnston is unreal. It's beautiful. This is the farmyard, which is well known to commuters because the bus used to stop there. You just ask for the farmyard. And as you can see, it's kept in pristine condition like the rest of the Kilcarn stud, of which it belongs. Immediately beyond this landmark is a small road called Yellow Walls Lane, the beginning of which is now known as Kilcarn Heights. This road was once one of the great 5 roads leading to Tara. It once went across the N2 Dublin Road through Johnstown Estate and on through Philpottstown Crossroads, both places of which we will learn more shortly. The lane probably derived its name from the remains of all the mud-walled cottages, traces of which were visible until the 1980s. A mass path ran from the Yellow Walls through the fields, through Oakes's land, and to emerge alongside a rat in a field called the Raheen, and all to the Old Town Kilcarn Road at Pastor Hill, which we had earlier. And this pass was used by locals to go to Mass in recent memory. The McLaughlins used it. Yeah. At the Dublin Road of the entrance to the Yellow Walls Lane, there stands a stone-built house. Okay? That's Rona Haley's. Not looking great. The family that lived here for hundreds of years, it is said that they were either lived in or owned Johnstown Estate, but they were chucked out and they were dispossessed and they came to live here in changed circumstances. At one time, the family earned a living